But I wanted to confirm that, cover the bases. You could feel, over California a little bit too much. Get some California blood in you. You might want to rap.
Good thing I didn't order. I ordered salad.
So you're going to take care of the speech outside conversations and you?
Yes, I'll do all that fun stuff. Yeah. If John doesn't, then I will. Yeah.
So you're on mute right now.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Microphone button.
Got it.
Thank you.
Did you start the recorder? Okay. Thank you.
Yes or no?
Huh?
Yes or no?
Yes, you are on tape.
Yeah. She gave me a thumbs up. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us on the phone. Just a couple more minutes for folks to join and we'll get started. As a reminder, if you are dialed in on the phone, please put your phone on mute and unmute when you have a question. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm glad you're in the room, Diane. It would have been weird to look out to nobody.
I know, you're not even, it doesn't even look like you're going to have an audience here.
This is the first time.
This is weird.
I guess Hometown Health isn't worried about appeals.
Yeah, usually we have a contingency of about 8 people from Hometown Health here. So.
Feel free to direct her.
Oh, yeah.
They're all rolling up, it looks like,
Here we go.
in the Escalade. It's like Hometown's rolling in right now.
Do you know how to silence everything on this?
I just turned the volume all the way down.
I don't know if that turns off like others. So.
When you're on the home screen, turn it all the way down.
Yeah.
And then- Damon, I did just a quick announcement. Phones on mute, but apparently we've already forgotten.
Did you do that already?
It just is a quick, just hey, give us a couple minutes, we're gonna get started, and remind you to put your phone on mute. So.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone. Easy questions to respond to. I mean, what, 15?
I kept double checking yesterday because I was so sure that more were just going to start showing up.
I know you asked me a question about the carrier onboarding schedule, so you wanted to split something out.
It's not a big
And I'm
deal.
like, I just ran out of time.
It's not a big deal. We have
We can
plenty.
still
We
do
have
it.
plenty of time.
I can still do it, I just,
No, it's no worries on that.
Just one quick on this one. The proposed reg say that
I know.
employee has to be, okay.
Concerns with them about us just going through that process.
All right.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So you're way on top of that one.
Yeah.
We'll take it as such.
And actually having another building.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good. It's one of those things when we had Barbara review the deck, she's called that out. Okay. We'll just make
Yeah,
sure.
I can forward you the email thread if you guys want a copy of it.
If you wouldn't mind, yeah.
Yeah, but I'll try to remember.
Well, I guess I have to move back here so I can block Matt's view.
Come on, you.
We don't bite,
You
I
can scoot
swear.
forward a row. I mean,
You don't want us like right in your face. We need some breathing room.
I'm trying to figure out why there's an extra row. We just think there were more people coming.
There's always an
I think it's just how it got set up.
Yeah.
I think it's that perennial thing. Nobody wants to sit in front of the class.
we'll go ahead and get started, John will be here shortly.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to kick it off then?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you'll unmute me.
I don't know how to work this Star Trek thing.
Press the red button.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Damon Haycock, Finance and Research Officer for the Exchange. I want to welcome everybody to the carrier onboarding session.
Today we are going over appeals. I know it's everybody's favorite topic. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and take roll. I know we have Hometown Health here. Can one person from each carrier please unmute your phones and let me know who's here?
Alicia. Hello, Anthem is here.
All right, I got Anthem.
Premier Access Dental.
Premier Access Dental.
Guardian Insurance.
We have Guardian. And was that Health Plan of Nevada?
Yes.
And the Nevada Health Co-op.
And Health Plan Services.
St. Mary's Health Plan. And Nevada Dental Benefits.
Anyone else?
Coventry Healthcare.
Anyone else? Who else do we usually have, John?
I think that's about it.
Okay.
Well, I take it by the participation we haven't pissed you guys off too much. You're still here, so that's reassuring. As always, if we do step in it, please let us know, and we will do our best to clean our shoes. So today we're here to talk about appeals, and so I'm going to get the bad news out of the way first. The federal rule, the way it's written, if you max out everything, an appeal could take as much as 440 days. Okay, so everybody go, oh my God, right now. Okay, now, that said, we are going to shorten that time frame as much as possible. We recognize, so part of the issue is if a person appeals, they can be reinstated retroactively. And so my concern is, I'm confident that the person that incurs a $10,000 claim will want to be reinstated. My concern is that the other 100 people that don't have major claims will not be reinstated, and of course that drives up costs. So we want to limit the risk to carriers by shortening that time frame as much as possible. There's some things that we have no control over, and we have to give them the maximum time. There are other things that we can reduce. So, for instance, we talk about there's basically 95 days for them to get information to us if there's a discrepancy between what they said and our data sources, right? If we request information from them, we have to give them the full 95 days to get that information. And then if they haven't given it to us in 95 days, we will terminate them, or we'll do whatever determination we think is appropriate based on the information that we have. At that point, they have 90 days to appeal it, right? So that takes up time. Now, if that person provides us information sooner than that, we'll do a little bit of back and forth with them, but generally, let's say you get us the data within 5 days and we say, no, that's not appropriate, we make a determination at that point rather than wait the full 95 days. So we'll try where we can to push it forward. The other thing is the appeals process itself. So once somebody says, I want to appeal, we have 90 days here at the exchange to get through the process. Now, we do have an informal process that we're going to go through to try and limit the number of hearings that we have. But our intent is to get that done as quickly as possible, and to get the hearing process done as quickly as possible, so we don't take the full 90 days. There will be some circumstances where working with the individual, it may take some time, and again, we will do our best to shorten that as much as possible. But you need to know the bad news first. It could take quite a bit of time. The other bad news piece of that is, even after we make a determination at the exchange level, so we have our informal level 1 process, our formal hearing level 2 process. Even after we make a determination, that person has a right to go to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and that process takes a number of days, and we have no control over that process. Now, I will say that the other way we could do this is we just say DHHS or HHS, you do everything. I don't think we want to do that, because who knows how long that will take. And I think we can get most of the appeals done prior to getting to that point. So again, I want to reassure you, we are going to do everything in our power to make that process as quick as possible. But there are some things we simply don't have control over. That we make a determination. They have 90 days to get to tell us that they want to appeal. We have no control over them telling us on the first day or the 90th day. So just to make sure that you're aware of that. And we hope that this will work as streamlined as possible. Now, that said, those appeals processes are for individuals only. They don't apply to SHOP. And so we'll go through some of that. So again, we're going to make a process as streamlined as possible. We welcome your input if you feel something isn't going to work. But I think we've had some pretty good back and forth on this, and I think what you're going to see from Eileen and the team is a pretty well thought out process given the constraints of the federal regulations, which, by the way, are not final yet. So this is, based on preliminary regulations, and that's the best that we can do right now. Some of these other states that are waiting might have the right idea, but we understand that you need to understand this so that you can help. That will be a factor in developing your rates, and we don't want to provide you with any excuses to raise rates any more than they're already going to be. So, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eileen.
Hi, so let me introduce myself. My name is Eileen Reba. I'm a senior business analyst with Xerox. We've also got Chad Hogan and Steve Wynn here, also from the Xerox team, as well as John Hager, who was just speaking, Damon Haycock, and Shauna DeRoos, from the Exchange. So, yes, as John was saying, today we're going to talk about appeals. And just to reiterate a couple of the points that he was making, we had to plan what we're going to do completely based on what federal guidance we have. And the majority of the details around appeals were just released at the end of January, and they're all proposed. And, of course, when you ask CMS when we're going to get final, they say soon. So we're moving forward as if the proposed is what we have to follow. What we're hoping to get out of today is we're going to present to you how we think that this is going to work. If there are certain places that we get to where you're just like, well, that's just unrealistic or that's impractical, we probably share some of that with you. But any suggestions that you have to help us still meet the proposed regulations, we're open to hearing your ideas about how we can alter the processes as we go through. The other caveat I just wanted to clarify is some of the questions that were submitted related to today's session were asking about carrier-managed complaints and appeals rather than exchange-managed complaints and appeals. Our focus today is on exchange-managed complaints and appeals, which are dictated by federal regulations. There's nothing in the federal regulations or nothing that the exchange is going to be asking for you to change in terms of how you handle your internal complaints processes, your internal appeals processes, and whatever the current state requirements are for reporting on that. We're not currently asking for any changes for that. So we can go ahead and get started. So in the slide deck, our meeting objectives are on slide 3, and what we're going to first just do is a brief overview. And then it does say individual and shop employer appeals process flows, but as John alluded to, that's actually misleading. We're mostly going to be focusing on the individual process flows. When we get there, I'll explain what some of the differences are for shop. And then when we get to the idea of how carriers can appeal, we really want to make that just sort of a guided, open discussion. Hear your thoughts on how you're hoping it's going to work, what your concerns are. We haven't made any decisions in that area yet, and so that's going to be part of our goal today. So if we move ahead to slide 5, first question is who has the right to initiate an appeal to the exchange? So this is an appeal that the exchange would manage. And basically it's any applicant enrollee for individual family or their authorized representative. On the shop side, we are going to be requiring that employees go through their employer in order to file appeals of the decisions. That will just facilitate us having one primary contact with the employer. The employer will automatically be an authorized representative of the employee so they can act on their behalf. And then, of course, we're going to have a process by which carriers can initiate an appeal. Moving to the next slide. We haven't decided what's every decision that we're going to actually have go through our formal appeals process. What we pretty much did here was sort of a brain dump, or what are the kinds of decisions that we think people are going to try to appeal. Some of which we may come back and decide later, you know what, this isn't really appropriate for the appeals process. And what we tried to identify on here is who could initiate these different types of appeals. Now, looking at this list, almost all of them have to do with eligibility, either to enroll in a QHP on the exchange or qualifications for some sort of financial assistance, whether it be APTC, CSR, Medicaid, as we go through. So that's what the majority of these things are going to be. Some of the other items that are on here, we're hoping will never get to a point where they would even come to an appeal, because, you know, if we have, for example, let's say an employer receives a letter that one of their employees is receiving APTC through the exchange, and it's because, based on the information the employee gave us, they're not providing minimal essential coverage. We're expecting the employer to call us up and say, what is this letter about? And we will talk to them about it, and hopefully we can resolve it, and it doesn't end up becoming, hey, I'm going to formally appeal that and send you in, you know, they can send us in, no, here's our plan or whatever, and it may never get to a formal appeal process. So we're still working some of that out, but these were just some items that we sort of did a brain dump to come up with. Is there anything that we missed on here that immediately come to mind for any of the carriers that we need to be considering?
This is Lisa from Anthem. I just have a question. I don't really see it called out here, but maybe it's implied. Is it, you have dependent eligibility? What about just the policy in general that, you know, maybe you don't qualify because you're not an American citizen or something, and somebody comes back and appeals? Is that on here somewhere? Maybe
yes, that would be lawful presence.
Okay, so any kind of just an overall policy eligibility type question, they could come back, whether it's based on lawful presence or any other eligibility criteria, correct?
Correct. So one of the scenarios I'll be walking us through is, let's say somebody enters their visa number when they apply, and the federal hub comes back and says, that visa's expired. Mm-hmm. We'll take that through. That'll be an example that we'll use to walk through the reasonable opportunity period as well as the appeal process on how that might work.
Okay. Okay, so that you guys are covering that one. Okay. Because I just saw dependent eligibility. I didn't really see kind of an overarching.
Right, and that dependent eligibility, Lisa, is mostly tied to on the shop side. So if there's a question about whether or not an employee can add a dependent or not, because that is going to be a decision by the shop employer.
Okay. So if you had a policy where one of the members on it, on the individual side, is in question, you know, so you've got someone that's applying with the family and you're questioning the eligibility of the spouse.
Yeah, certainly that could be a case, or we might have a question. There's a child with a different last name on initial enrollment, and we're taking self-attested data, but if for some reason a carrier has a reason to suspect fraud, they could certainly file an appeal in which then we can review, you know, ask for. We haven't talked through all of that in terms of that documentation, but so that's why with dependent eligibility, an individual also could initiate that appeal.
Okay, all right, thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else think of anything that we missed? This is not your only opportunity. If you think of something 3 weeks from now, please feel free to use that exchange carrier's mailbox and shoot it off to us. Okay, so we just talked about things that we know we're going to consider as a possible appealable decisions, but there are certain things that are definitely not appealable to the exchange, and we deal with that on slide 7. The first is any decisions you're making in terms of claims, you know, anything that is a pure carrier internal matter. We want no part of that. That's all you guys. So if they call the exchange and they say, hey, my carrier didn't pay this claim, or they only paid this much, we'll say, you need to contact your carrier. And we will provide the carrier contact information for them. We're also not going to be making decisions on behalf of welfare for Medicaid and CHIP eligibility determinations. And we have reached agreements with the Department of Welfare in which when someone files an appeal, they might actually be appealing multiple things. So, for example, someone might be appealing that they're eligible for Medicaid when the federal hub has said that they're not, based on the self-reported income that they've provided. And they may also say, well, I'm going to enroll in the QHP, and you're offering me $220 a month in APTC, but I think that if I don't get Medicaid, I should be getting $600 a month in APTC. So they could actually be appealing both the APTC determination and the Medicaid ineligibility decision at the same time. And if that's the case, if there's anything on there related to CHIP or Medicaid, we're going to hand that off, and that's going to be, that entire appeal process will be handled through Department of Welfare. If, when they reach their decision, that the person is not eligible for Medicaid, but they are eligible for the APTC change, they will bring that back to us to effectuate the changes. And then we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the process flows. The other type of decision that
I have a question.
Yes.
Going back to slide 6, there's the reconciliation item, non-reconciliable payment. What kind of dollar amounts or payment types can be claimed, not claimed, I'm sorry, appealed in this one?
So we sort of put that on there just in case through our back and forth, maybe somebody's enrollment gets terminated because we weren't able to reconcile a payment. Steve, can you speak to that at all? We started talking that there might be some scenarios where...
Or in regards to a payment?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if the individual feels like they've made payment, then and we say, no, you haven't, they could appeal that decision. We would have to review it. It would start off as just an inquiry at first, and if they don't feel like they like the answer, they can appeal it, and we'll take a look at it again, and we'll run them through the appeals process, but so that we can validate that that payment was actually not received.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the important thing to remember is in the regulations, there are really broad appeal rights. Pretty much any decision that the exchange makes, technically, if they wanted to, they could file an appeal. We're going to try to do things in our call center to mitigate that so it doesn't get that far, as much as we possibly can. So then going back to slide 7, the last thing that definitely is not a decision that's appealable to the exchange is any reconciliation or penalties assessed by the IRS under the Affordable Care Act for individuals or for employers. We will go ahead and redirect them to the IRS if they are asking about that. Moving on to slide 8. Complaints and appeals, as you guys probably know just from your experience, that gets mixed up a lot of times. And they're really two very distinctly different elements under the regulations. An appeal is something that's going to cause the reconsideration of a decision that the exchange has already made. And it's almost always going to be related to eligibility for QHP, APTC, CSR, or something related to do with enrollment. Complaint, on the other hand, is a communication of a grievance or some other dissatisfaction with some operational process that we've done. So we're going to take complaints from anybody who calls the exchange and wants to lodge a complaint. We will track that and we will record that. But nothing that comes from a complaint will ever have an impact on an eligibility determination or any other types of adjudication. That has to be done through the formal eligibility determination process or through an appeal. And any kinds of complaints that we get about provider networks, claims processes, things of that nature, we say that they'll be tracked, but we're not going to manage them. We're going to redirect them back out to you because that's internal to you. Now, when we say we track them, this was one of the questions that was asked, submitted, just to clarify what that means. we, as the call center, have to track every customer interaction that we have. So we're just going to mark off, hey, we have a complaint. The basic subject generally was somebody had a complaint about benefits. We'll check that category. And then if it's about a specific carrier, we'll make a note that it's about a third party. It may also be about a broker. It may also be about a particular customer service agent. We will track that. But that's the limit of the information that we're going to record there. We're not going to gather any more information from them, the details for it. And in terms of the tracking that, we haven't really discussed in detail what we're going to do with that data, but it will be all reportable. So certainly if a carrier has an interest in seeing the summary of what we get, that's something that we can certainly talk about sharing. But keep in mind, they're going to call us, they're going to complain, we're going to say, you really need to report this directly to your carrier, here's the contact information. We have no control over whether they'll actually call you. So that's just something to keep in mind and distinguish. And then another question that was submitted related to this was, what are we going to redirect to DOI? We're only going to redirect to DOI if we say you need to contact your carrier and their response is, well, I've already contacted my carrier and I've already exhausted everything I think I can do there. Then we'll just advise them of their right to contact DOI and provide them contact information. It's not based on subject matter or anything along those lines.
So when you say redirect, it's really just giving the consumer the information about who they can contact, but you're not actually forwarding any files or records about the complaint. Exactly. Okay.
Exactly. And the other question that was asked about this, just while we're on this slide, we'll just go ahead and deal with this. If you guys get complaints about us, because you're a call center, someone might call up and say, hey, I have a problem with the exchange. We sort of would expect the same process in reverse. We're not expecting you to track anything with regard to us. Just redirect them and give them the exchange's contact information. Any
question?
Other? Yes.
The complaints about provider networks, benefits, and claims processes will be tracked, but would you be logging them and then following up on it for the carrier or the member? How they will be tracked?
No, it's just because we need a record of every customer interaction and what the subject was. So literally the only details about that we are tracking is who called and when, the fact that it was a complaint, the fact that it was about some very high-level general topic for our categorization. So maybe it was about shop and compare or something.
Time to see a provider.
Right. And we'll have an other category for things. And we're not really interested in the super details of that. We're going to be we have reporting requirements of our own by category of what types of things and what are the counts that we get. But we're really not going to do much more with that information, or we don't know exactly what we're going to do with it yet.
Right, so that case is closed when we give that person the phone number. Here's the phone number of the carrier you want to talk to. And if they said, I've talked to the carrier, who else can I complain to? From our perspective, I don't know, you call it the DOI. Is that, I think that's where complaints go after that, or GovChaw or somebody, probably DOI. So we would, basically say, all right, here's the phone number if that's what you want. And to us, that call is closed. We've got the data, but we're not doing anything with it after that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to slide 9. I know that this is a very busy slide, and it contains a lot of information, but it's been our experience that every time that we need to discuss this with folks, it really helps to sort of see it laid out in a timeline. And just to reiterate what John said at the beginning, don't freak out about the maximum 140-day time frame. That's just if everything just doesn't, everything gets maxed out to the greatest possibility. So reasonable opportunity is something that's specifically called out for in the federal regulations, and basically what it means is that when somebody applies through the exchange, they're going to self-attest to certain data about their lawful presence, about their financial situation if they're looking for financial assistance, and that information is going to be submitted and checked against the federal hub, which will return a yes, everything looks great, green check marks all the way down, go ahead and enroll. But there's going to be some cases where there's going to be discrepancy. So I'm going to use my example of someone enters in their visa number and it comes back from the federal hub that that visa number is expired. We now have what's known as an inconsistency. So we are required to notify the person that, hey, there's an inconsistency. We are also required under the regulations to presume that they fat-fingered something, that this is just a mistake that could be easily cleared up, and therefore we're going to presume them eligible for QHP enrollment or whatever APTC CSR amount that they think that they're entitled to initially. And so we consider that eligibility determination to be in an interim state. It's not the final eligibility determination. It's just, here's what the hub said. It's different from what you said. We're going to go with your self-attested right now. But then you have an obligation as the consumer to provide us with supporting evidence. So what the rules call for is that they have up to 90 days plus 5 mailing days, which gives us 95 days, to submit that proof to us. Now, as John was saying, it is in everyone's best interest, the exchange carriers, that this thing doesn't go on for 95 days. We want to resolve this as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, though, the action item is in the consumer's hands. So if they don't send us anything, we have no other choice but then to wait to give them the full 95 days from the date of the notice to submit it. If, however, they do send something to us ahead of time, we're going to start working it immediately. So the goal is that we're going to try to get this resolved as quickly as we can. So let's assume we've received the documentation that they sent in. Moving up one more step on our ladder, our verification and final eligibility determination that we're going to make, we're estimating that that's going to take between 2 and 15 days processing time. We're hoping it's going to be more like 2. A lot's going to depend on what's going to be available to us electronically and how much of this is going to be manual. But as I said, it's in everybody's best interest that we resolve these things quickly. So we'll be working towards trying to keep that period as short as possible. And then we will render a final eligibility determination, and we will send that notice. Yes?
Okay, that term processing time makes me a little nervous. This is calendar days still, right? Not business days?
Yes, this is calendar days.
Okay.
This is all calendar days. Okay, you're right. That's one of the reasons why it goes all the way up to 15. Okay, great. So now we've made our eligibility determination. The regulations say that we cannot effectuate any changes based on that determination. Now, certainly if whatever they send us substantiate what they self-attested to, there's nothing to change, right? We're going to continue with what they have. If, however, the determination is different from what we've presumed during the reasonable opportunity period, we cannot effectuate that any earlier than 10 days after and no later than 30 days after the determination notice. So this will probably be dictated based on when in the time of the month the decision's made, so they can be effectuated the first of the coming month. Now, under the regulations, as long as their premiums have been paid for that entire, whatever the length of time is, and let's just say, God forbid, they took the full 90 days to send in their stuff, as long as they've been making and they're 100% current on their account, we need to pay claims during that entire period. If for some reason we determine that they are I'll talk about that actually on the next slide. I will wait on that. And that eligibility determination is considered final unless the customer files an appeal. So while technically reasonable opportunity is not part of the appeals process, it is a really important part of it in the sense that it's our means to resolve these inconsistencies to prevent things from getting to an appeal. And that's our hope, that the majority of these things will be taken care of at this level. It also just provides the enrollee with a fair, reasonable time to approve the claims that they made. And if you read the details of how CMS approached this, basically their argument is that the I'll just actually read you their exact text. They said, the marginal value of providing continued benefits to the individual pending appeal does not outweigh the cost associated with maintaining services and reinstating services retroactive to the date or termination if the individual should prevail on his or her appeal. So that's from the preamble, but that's sort of what CMS is thinking. Any questions on this process before I talk about the appeals process, and then I'll talk about eligibility during the appeals process?
I think you were kind of talking about payments previously, and maybe you're going to talk about this, but if someone does go through appeal and they're going to be retroactively added back, and now they owe for 4 months, when they're retroactively
full payment would need to be made if we're going to do a retroactive.
It will, so they would have to come in with the full payment.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like you're going to go ahead and enroll them and then invoice and then wait for them to pay.
You don't want us to do a 24-month payment plan? No, payment in full.
Payment in full up front. So if they want to get themselves added or someone added back to their policy retroactively, they're going to have to come in with the money. Okay, thanks.
Right, and on a related note, if someone takes the full 90 days on the reasonable opportunity period, and they also, let's say they're receiving APTC, technically they have 90 days grace. If they stop paying, depending on how long this process takes, they might actually get terminated for non-payment before this whole thing even gets resolved.
Which may add to the appeal process again, but
right.
That's a whole nother
animal. All right.
So
yes.
I'm sorry, just a quick question. So this will always look the same to the carriers, though they will look eligible to us because their payment is going to be received.
Correct.
At this time.
Correct.
Okay.
And the carrier really won't even know really technically where they're at in this because the clock starts ticking when the variance between customer attestation and the federal hub, right? It's not necessarily their effective date on the policy.
Correct.
So it's not like 90 days and okay, here they're the first 90 days starting on their effective date. I mean, this could have started even before they were effective on their current coverage.
Right, and it's going to be the date of the notice. So if the customer has elected to only receive electronic notices, it'll be from the date of that notice.
So an example could be, October 5th, somebody tries to enroll in the coverage, and we provide a determination, and they say, I don't agree with it, I'm going to appeal it. They would have from the date of that determination that they would be 90 days from October 5th to make the appeal. If they appealed it on October 5th, we would have 90 days to deal with it. Hopefully, we'd have it done before coverage even started on January 1st.
Right. So it's something that the carrier or the issuer doesn't really even know what. Just because they're effective on this date doesn't mean that's the start of the 90 days. It starts before that. It can start before that. And so it's something we're not really even going to know where they're at in the process. We just know if they're eligible, you load them, they've been paying, great. And if there's some change later, then we would get 834 to update us.
Yeah, and there'll be a identifier on the 834 file that would say that it was a change due to appeal or something like that, or is there something like that?
Yeah, there's a termination reason due to redetermination of eligibility.
Or what about an instatement of coverage?
I'm not aware of an exact code on the 834 for instatement, a reinstatement of it. I have to go back and look at the 834 to see if there's a specific code for that.
And when they appeal, so let's say when they originally came on, could there be a potential where they're appealing something, the determination is this date? I guess because it's based on member attestation, they originally start with the spouse on their policy, and the exchange asks for more information from them, but you'll go ahead and enroll them with the spouse because it's based on the original attestation of the member, correct?
Right. So technically, if you read the regulation, they could appeal what the federal hub comes back and says. But because the reasonable opportunity, there's no reason to because they can get everything that they want for the duration of the reasonable opportunity period.
Right. And so then you may ask for additional, like paperwork or documentation, but they still start out with based on their member attestation, and have that time period to provide the necessary documentation to contradict what potentially the federal hub has said.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so that's just the reasonable opportunity period. Let's move to slide 10 where we'll talk about the actual appeals process. So we've rendered the final eligibility determination. And from 90 days from that decision notice date, they have to appeal if they don't like the decision. Now, the first thing that we're going to do in our exchange process, and we'll go into this in more detail shortly, is we're going to put things through an informal resolution. And this is called for in the regs. And that's something where the Xerox appeals team is going to be looking at this in detail to try to resolve it based on whatever evidence it is that we receive with the appeal. And we'll talk about that in detail. If they don't like the outcome that comes out of that informal resolution, and just to clarify, we say it's expected in less than 30 days. If we can do it in 2 days, we're going to do it in 2 days. We just don't know yet what the volume of appeals is going to be, and just what the labor is going to be in there. So we know we've only got 90 days from the day we receive the appeal request to render a decision. So if it has to go up through a formal hearing process, we want to allow as much time as possible for that to get scheduled. So right now we say less than 30 days. I'm hoping that 6 months into 2014, it'll be less than 14. But they can, if they don't like that outcome, say, no, I want a formal hearing. And this is actually changed as of yesterday. We were primarily going to use the Department of Administration for our hearings, but we are now, and this is not finalized, but we are now looking to actually utilize welfare to handle all of our hearings. And the only way it would get up to Department of Administration is if there's overflow, if welfare can't handle the volume. So that's one change from what is on here, and this is a very, very recent development. And we'll update you more as that gets decided.
But
So the Department of
Go ahead.
So the Department of Welfare will be getting all kinds of appeal requests.
Yeah, so really this is transparent to all of you. The process is still the same. We were in our discussions, so we had considered sending it to the Department of Administration, who has a hearings division. Medicaid does hearings for Medicaid products. And what happens is in the appeals that Eileen was talking about, where somebody appeals both a Medicaid eligibility determination and the APTC, they have a right to go to Medicaid for that appeal. So the way we had it set up before, there were two issues. Number one, if we split that up, Medicaid would hear the Medicaid piece, and then the hearings division would hear the APTC piece, and they could come back with decisions that conflict with each other potentially. The other item was, let's say we took it on, we went through an informal process, our formal hearing process with the Department of Administration, that individual has the right to appeal it to the Medicaid unit. So it didn't make sense to send it to administration. We are going to send it to the Medicaid appeals group, who already does these types of appeals realistically. There's going to be some new stuff that they don't do now, but they can learn it pretty quickly. But they already do this kind of process. So it really made more sense that they do that. We got buy-in from the Division of Welfare because they do the Medicaid appeals. So that makes more sense. And so the only time it's going to be going to the Department of Administration is when they hit capacity and they can't manage the workload. So we're working with them through those items. But as I said earlier on, this is really transparent to you. You need to understand the timing so that you can properly provide rates that cover this risk. But I think from your perspective, it really shouldn't make a difference whether it's at administration or at Medicaid or welfare.
I have another question, so please bear with me. I'm trying to understand this as well. But if there's SSN verification or lawful presence, those kind of appeals will be going to Department of Administration, or would they be also going to Department of Welfare?
Department of Welfare, Division of Welfare. So the majority of the appeals that we're expecting to get are going to be around things like lawful presence and probably mostly APTC. That's really what we're expecting the highest volume of our appeals to come from. And so the welfare is just in the perfect position. They evaluate income all the time, as well as lawful presence. So it's really a very natural fit.
Okay, thanks.
So what's great about the informal resolution is the regulations say that if we provide an outcome and they don't request a hearing, it automatically becomes the exchange decision. So hopefully most of these things will get them resolved in the informal resolution. That's our goal. So this will happen much faster than the 90-day time frame. And when we get into the process flow, we'll talk about other ways we're trying to mitigate this taking 90 days. Now, let's just, whatever point in time that we get the exchange decision, whether it's because informal resolution became the final decision or because they had a hearing that went through welfare, the individual has the right, if they don't like the exchange appeals decision, as John was saying earlier, to appeal directly to HHS. And they have 30 days from the exchange decision notice date to appeal, and then HHS has up to 90 days to reach their final decision. So that's how you get this crazy maximum 300-day time frame for appeals processes, for the whole appeals process from the original decision, but it really should almost never get to that, well, at least we hope.
Are you going to be doing any kind of reporting on statistics of how far people get through this?
We're going to be doing a lot of reporting on the appeals because it's going to impact us in terms of staffing and in terms of
Additionally, we have reporting requirements to SOCIO on how many level 2 appeals or how many hearings that we have for the exchange. So we will be collecting that data and reporting on it publicly.
Yeah, because I think it would affect our risk calculations too.
Right.
We won't have it for the first year.
No, they won't even be done for the first year. Your first case will still be pending.
No, we'll be done.
Our mantra is we don't want things to get to a hearing. So we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that this gets resolved in informal resolution, assuming it gets all the way to the appeal level. Okay, so what the next slide, slide 11, eligibility during an appeal. That first bullet point there, this is spelled out in the proposed regs. So if it's a mid-year or an annual redetermination decision that they are appealing, the eligibility remains the same as immediately before the redetermination being appealed. Where the regs are not clear, and we've gone back and forth with this with SOCIO and had every compliance expert on every side look at this, is what specifically we're to do if what they're appealing is an initial. So if in the reasonable opportunity period, take my visa example, said your visa's expired, then you send in whatever proof is, or maybe you don't send in any proof for the 95 days, and we render a final eligibility determination that you're not eligible to enroll. Technically, you have 90 days from that decision to file your appeal. So we came up with these policies that we believe are in complete line with the regulations as a means of mitigating risk. So we're looking for some feedback here. So for a determination at the end of the reasonable opportunity period where the eligibility to enroll was denied, so that's where we're talking lawful presence, incarceration, those things. We're going to terminate that enrollment prospectively, assuming the account is current. So they will have paid the premium for the months that they paid for, and they will get their claims covered for that period. But we will terminate them prospectively because the initial determination was that they weren't eligible to enroll. Now, if the appeal, they file an appeal, not all of them will, but if they do, and that reverses our denial of eligibility to enroll, then we are going to have to restore that enrollment retroactively to effectuation date. But they will have to make full premium payment in order for that to be effectuated. The other part of this is APTC CSR.
Could I just stop you for a
Absolutely.
question? We'll have to pay claims during that period of time.
As long as the premiums are paid.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Will the carriers even know that these people are in the middle of an appeal process? I mean, is there some sort of an indicator on the file that you guys are intending for us to track these people separately, or?
The person would just be terminated because they were deemed ineligible going forward. I'm sure, I don't know what the termination reasons would be. Chad, do you know?
Yeah, I was actually looking through the companion guide, the FFE companion guide, to see if there was a determination specifically for that. And there's not a determination for termination due to ineligibility. It's just a termination.
So let's say somebody has made the payment and they're going through the appeals process. They are covered. You need to pay the claims. Would you treat them any differently if you knew they were going through the appeals process?
No, I think I was just curious if you guys were going to be asking for reporting on those types of people, and so we would need to build something in our system to take that information from you.
Okay, I have a question. But then if you find that they're not eligible, okay, and we pay claims that first 30 days, we can't go back and ask for the money back because now they should have never been eligible. They were in a waiting period, right?
Remember at the beginning I said there's going to be things in the federal regulations that were going to make us all uncomfortable that we're not necessarily going to agree with? That's one of them.
This is a big one.
It really is, because they can plan a
So
surgery.
basically, no matter what you guys end up determining whether if they're eligible or not eligible, so long as they've paid their premium, we have to continue to pay their claim. Once you terminate them, even if you were to retro terminate them, we are still responsible for those claims.
Now let's back up for a second though.
Yeah.
So if they make an attestation that says something that they think they're eligible, and then we have we have data source that says they're not eligible. We make a determination that says they're not eligible, right? They have 95 days to get the information. Do we have to go by their attestation so that they can provide
for the reasonable opportunity period?
Right, so they could be covered during that time. Could they be covered during that time, or does their coverage not effectuate until they get that?
No.
Immediately.
Based on their stuff, we have to proceed under 155.315.
So it's like presumptive eligibility, basically. They get presumptive eligibility for 90 days.
Right.
Right, but I thought in that 90 days, even if you guys do determine someone shouldn't have been eligible because they never produced the documentation or whatever, that you would tell us, it would be prospectus, you would tell us to take that person, if it's a member that needs to come off the policy, they would remain in effect for that period of whatever to the date you made the final determination, and then you would tell us, like the first of the next month, term this member. You would not retroactively go back in that first 90 days.
No, we can't.
That's correct. So let's not confuse the appeals process with the inconsistency process for verification of eligibility. There's two separate.
That will always be prospective. In that first 90 days, we wouldn't have to go back and say, oh, we've been paying claims and they never were eligible in the first place.
Correct.
Yeah, but I mean so then not the first 90 days, not the reasonable days, but when the appeals process begins and then you determine that for whatever reason they should have been or should not have been from the date of the appeal.
Right.
Would you retro to that day?
Right. So that's what we're trying to get at with this second bullet on slide 11. Now we've made a determination that they never should have been allowed to enroll in the first place, but under the regs, they were allowed to enroll until we made that determination. We don't know if they're going to appeal that or not. So we're going to prospectively terminate them.
But if they're committing fraud,
Why wouldn't we retrospect?
Yeah,
I don't understand that
It's the reg. 155-315. Have fun. Anyone want to see it?
I think Medicaid has the same thing. They have presumptive eligibility.
Now keep in mind, none of this is final. Well, actually, that one's final. Never mind. Darn it! I thought that one was proposed. Nope, that one's final. Never mind. I was going to say, it's not final. Maybe
but in that first 90 days, everything is forward-looking to us. It's not like we're going to say, oh, you have to pay these claims and they were never eligible. As long as they were paying.
Right.
And you find out on the 89th day that somebody shouldn't have been eligible, and that happens to be on February 20th, you would tell us to term that particular individual on March 1st.
Not on February, not in that example, because the law says we can't effectuate any sooner than 10 days. From the
well, okay, so the 10 days, but I mean, it's
prospective. Yeah.
Prospective. It's not something that we're going to say, oh, you just told me in that first 90 days to return somebody, and I've had $100,000 in claims. It'll be that, they're still eligible, they've paid their premium. Up until that point, you tell us to terminate them. That won't be retroactive.
Correct.
Right.
But at least they're paying their
this
premium.
may be overkill. Yeah, because this may be overkill at this point. But because of the grace period, isn't there a chance that they may pay the initial payment for the first month and then not the second 2 months, but they're within the 90 days?
Absolutely.
Yes.
But then
So we would have a chance of one payment within 3 months, but still being responsible for all 3 months.
But we have that chance with everybody, regardless of whether they're determined eligible or not later.
Wouldn't they be charged for non-payment?
Yeah, I mean, if they pay the first month of premium and they have APTC and they never pay again, regardless of whether they're determined later to be eligible or not eligible, we're stuck on the hook for the first month of claims. It doesn't matter whether they're eligible or not. It's everybody that we're on the hook for that all the time.
And so just so everybody's clear, I think that was Lisa from Anthem answering that question. But yes, the answer is yes, you would be on the hook just for the first 30 days after you didn't have payment. So while this process, so let's say they pay for January, they stop paying after that. That grace period would go through February basically, but then you would pin claims after that. But yeah, we agree with that interpretation here at the exchange. Not that we agree that it's the right thing to do, but it's the right interpretation of the regulations.
John, just to make it clear, I want to, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it. In the first 90 days, they're paying claims based on the reasonable opportunity period. If they stop paying after the first month, are they still paying claims for the second 2 months to determine redetermination on that reasonable opportunity period, or can they pen claims that second month? And that's the question I have.
Right. So the reason this is written this way, if at the end of reasonable opportunity period where the eligibility to enroll was denied, we will only terminate prospectively if the account is current. If we're about to terminate prospectively because we've determined that they're not eligible, but they haven't paid, we can do retro back to the end of the first month.
Okay.
Or whenever the last full month of pay was paid. They might have paid the first 2 months, but not the third.
And then we have the opportunity as carriers to file for that reinsurance pool money that they're collecting for the first couple of years if we get stuck with some of these big claims, right? I don't know how that all works yet, but we're collecting.
That's for a different department, right?
Right. Yeah. So
Carrier pigeon to HHS.
Yeah, exactly. And we might get that fund a year from now,
soon.
But still, soon.
Okay. Any other? I know this is really confusing. Trust me, we went round and round trying to come up with what we thought was going to mitigate risk, but still comply with the federal regs.
And round again.
And round again.
Yeah. It's been a merry-go-round.
Yes.
Okay, so if we're okay at this point on the eligibility to enroll being denied, now let's talk about determinations at the end of the reasonable opportunity period where the final determination was that the APTC or CSR is lower than what they self-attested to. So they're really eligible for $350 in APTC, but they self-attested that they really should be getting $600 in APTC. If they appeal, we're going to continue with the self-attested APTC to ensure the continuity of coverage, unless the appellant requests a reduction, because we will warn them, hey, you got to settle this up with the IRS at the end. So you're welcome to continue at this amount, but you might have a major tax liability as a result. Our concern is if we don't continue it, that folks are going to drop out and say, well, if I'm not getting $600 a month, I can't afford this, and then they'll just terminate coverage. So the idea is we want to facilitate keeping them enrolled on the assumption that they'll eventually be able to approve and win on appeal.
So they're at least paying their premium, right? Because
Right.
otherwise they don't pay their premium, or they pay for the month and they don't pay, and you're back in the issue that we just talked about.
And
but this is Lisa from Anthem. You'll only do that if they appeal, right? So if you determine your example that they originally started with 600 and then, I don't know what you said, they went down to 350. That's what the final determination was. They do nothing. You're going to change it to 350, right?
We're going to change it. We're going to change it to 350, and then if they file an appeal 60 days later, we will, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we will retroactively go back to 600 for that period. And honestly, it doesn't impact us if it's right or it's wrong, because it's between them and the IRS at the end of the year.
Right, but it just, I mean, you wouldn't, only time you would go back and change it is if they came back and appealed. If they accepted it, it's just, that's just what it's going to be, right?
Correct.
If they came back and appealed it and won the appeal.
Right.
That's the only time we change it, right? If they appealed it and the determination, the original determination was upheld from our system,
We'd leave it the way it is.
We'd leave it the way it is.
Okay, but if they come in and they appeal, and they say, because final determination was 350, and they come in and they appeal, at that point, at the time of the appeal, will you take them back to 600? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay.
And what if you make it?
And then if they lose, you'll take them back to 350.
Exactly.
What if you?
Right. And will you take them back to 350 retroactively?
Yes. Right?
Okay.
No, we can't. Prospectively.
Let's be prospective.
Prospectively in that case too. Okay.
Right, and that's why we're saying that we'll do this unless we're going to warn them that they've got that potential tax liability if they do lose on appeal. Therefore, if they say, no, you know what, continue my appeal, but just do the 350 because I don't want to risk that, we'll do that as well.
Okay.
And again, from your perspective, you'll simply get it on a file that says this is the APTC amount.
What if you have someone that has getting APTC and they're saying they're getting all of the premiums paid for, and you find out that there's an issue with, you've asked them for a determination of eligibility, and you find out that they aren't eligible? Are we going to, as carriers, still get any of that APTC, or are we going to lose all of that?
Could you please repeat the question? It's on really far away.
So the question was, if a person is enrolled in the plan under APTC and then we later find out that they're not eligible for APTC, will the carrier lose that amount? And my understanding is no. My understanding is the exchange determines that that somebody's APTC eligible, and so we send a file to you guys and to and CMS, and you get reimbursed based on that file. And then when we later determine that they're not eligible for APTC, we send you a prospective change to the APTC. So later on you don't get it, and so they'd have to pay the full amount. And then that individual will have to settle up with the IRS at the end of the tax year. So we're going to make sure it's pretty clear that you need to be honest with us, because you're going to be on the hook for a pretty big bill if you're not honest with us.
It's my understanding that any APTC amounts that carriers get from the U.S. Treasury, they keep.
Yeah, but what if they don't pay taxes?
And that's the CMS or IRS absorbs it.
Okay.
I agree. I mean that's really, you're gonna the other issue that is not APTC is CSR. If a person says that they are at 199% FPL, but they're really at 201% FPL, the APTC difference is minimal. The CSR difference, the cost sharing reduction, is huge. you have not been penalized. You get the CSR the whole year, and there is no reconciliation at the end of the year. Pretty incredible, but that's the way the rules are going. So,
say it again, please. Your last sentence.
I said pretty incredible, but that's the way the rules are. No, before that, though, I think is what you were getting at. So if a person says they're at 199% of the federal poverty level, which is under the 87% cost sharing reduction AV, but they're really at 201, which would be at the 73% cost sharing reduction AV, you all will be getting reimbursed at the 87%, the difference between the 87 and the 70, when really they should have only been at the lower AV level. The APTC amount will be reconciled at the end of the year, but that's only a 2% difference. So you're really only talking, what, $50 probably? I mean, not a huge amount at the end of the year. But that CSR is never reconciled. It's kind of surprising, eyebrow raising, but the way the rules read, there is no reconciliation for CSR. You simply get it as determined by the exchange.
Okay, thanks.
So again, it's still, the carrier is still whole. The carrier is still made whole. The IRS is, and so we'll see how this goes over the next 5 years. But
any other questions before we move on to the process flow? Okay, so again, let me reiterate what I said earlier. This is just the standard process flow for individuals, not for shop employers. That's a mistake up at the top. We will correct that in the presentation. The main difference with the shop employer and the shop employee is that they do have appeal rights. Their reasonable opportunity period is only 30 days. If we have some sort of discrepancy, the employee says that their address is this, but the employer had told us their address was something else. And then they can appeal to adhere to the exchange, but they do not have the rights to go to a hearing. So I apologize for that confusion, but we will correct that. So we're looking at this purely from the individual's perspective. The regs allow for them to either file a standard appeal request or an expedited appeal request. We'll talk about expedited appeals in a little bit. If it's not an expedited request, that 90-day clock for the exchange to render their decision starts. Our QA team is going to review the request, and we're going to track that as a case. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look to see if there's any Medicaid or CHIP elements to it, regardless of everything else that's in there. And if it is, we're going to transfer it to them. And then Division of Welfare will take care of that. And we're just going to pen the case in our records until we hear back from Division of Welfare as to what they decided. And just following that flow up, let's assume that they render a decision. It'll be Division of Welfare that will notify the appellant, and if they ruled on QHP eligibility to enroll APTC CSR, depending on if that's a factor, determines on what the consumer is allowed to do then. If it is QHP APTC CSR, they can appeal to HHS. If it's not, they appeal to Nevada State District Court, just like they do today for Division of Welfare. Now, going back, let's assume there were no Medicaid or CHIP elements. If that's the case, we're going to keep that in-house. And the first thing we're going to look at is, was the appeal filed within the allotted 90 days from the decision notice? And if it wasn't, we're going to dismiss it. And we're going to close the case. And we will notify them that we've dismissed it. They do have a right to file a vacate request. If they can somehow justify why they needed more than 90 days. We can't really think of a lot of reasons that they'll be able to justify that, so we don't anticipate that happening very often. But if it is within the 90 days, that's when our informal resolution process is going to start. And basically what we're going to do here, and this is how we're going to try to mitigate the duration there. Hopefully when they send in their appeal request, they'll attach whatever their evidence is, and we'll look at it. If we don't have everything we need to render a decision, we're going to do a one-time, hey, we don't have what we need. You sent us X, we need Y and Z. Then we're going to give them 15 days from the date of the notice that we need more information for them to send it. If they don't send it, we're going to render a decision with what we've got in hand. If they do send it, we'll consider it, and then we'll render our, I should say outcome, I'm sorry. Informal resolution is not a decision, it's an outcome. So moving a little bit further along, once we determine our outcome, we'll send them a notice, and then they have the option for a formal hearing, which would then go to the Division of Welfare through the hearing process, and they have 15 days to file that hearing request. Or they can withdraw their appeal based on the informal resolution outcome. Or let's say they don't withdraw, we don't hear from them. We don't get a hearing request, they don't withdraw. We're going to basically take that as a withdrawal, and informal resolution outcome becomes the official decision, and we will effectuate the change. Are there any questions on this flow? Great. Let's talk about then how it's different for the expedited process on slide 14. Again, this only applies to individuals. So under proposed 155-540, we need to grant an expedited appeal under circumstances where someone's health or life is seriously jeopardized. Just so that you know, there's been a lot of pushback from the state exchanges to the feds about a 3 working day clock to make a decision on an expedited appeal, especially if a hearing is required. And what CMS has basically said is they're taking it under advisement, and they expect that there'll be some flexibility or some changes in the final regs. But we don't know what that'll be or when we'll find out. So let's assume for now we get 3 days to do this.
And it's interesting because the regulation actually says 3 days. And everything in the regulation talks about calendar days. They don't reference working days. So you get one on a Friday before a 3-day weekend, and you're working overtime. I don't know.
You're rendering an immediate decision.
Right.
No, go to hearing.
Yeah, yeah. In the preamble, they actually do use the phrase working days.
Oh, they do working days in the preamble.
preamble.
But of course, the regulation doesn't specify. So I imagine you'll be seeing that different. Or hopefully, you'll see it increase from 3 to 5 or maybe 10 days would be nice.
So what is that? When you say that, what if it doesn't? Does that mean you guys just have to just immediately just take a guess?
We are. That's exactly what we have to do. We have to plan the process as if the proposed is going to be the final, and hopefully it won't, and we'll adjust accordingly.
Okay.
So the process is actually very expedited, as you can see here in the flow. Basically, again, if it's Medicaid CHIP, it goes over to Division of Welfare directly. If it's not Medicaid CHIP, we will keep it. The first thing, again, we're going to look at is did they file it within 90 days, because that rule still applies despite the fact that it's expedited. And we will dismiss it if it's not. If it is, then we have to decide whether the grounds that they've provided justify the expedition. If it doesn't, then what we're going to do is we will deny not the appeal, but their request for an expedited appeal, and we will let them know that, and it goes through the normal process. It now becomes a standard appeal. It will go through informal resolution, and so we'll have 90 days from the decision, from the date the appeal request was received, to resolve it. If, however, we do decide that it warrants an expedited appeal, we have to go directly to the hearing process. We just don't have the luxury of time to otherwise do that. And then the next slide actually talks about that hearing process. Again, this is for individuals only, not for shop employers who do not have hearing rights. So this one's a little bit crazy to follow. I'm not going to try to walk us all the way through it. But basically, there's 2 main entry points. Either that expedited appeal request was granted, or after they get their informal resolution outcome, they filed a formal hearing request. I want to take this to a hearing. In either case, we're basically going to be reviewing the case. Just one more time, because like I said, our mantra is we want to avoid hearings as much as possible. Just make sure we didn't make any mistakes in our informal resolution decision or on the expedited appeal. Just if we have enough evidence to make a decision, we'll make the decision. But if we don't have enough evidence, and if that decision will not be favorable to the appellant, we just got to go directly to the hearing. We just don't have time in 3 days to otherwise do that. And basically, from the Xerox QA team side, we're going to package everything up, and we'll be handing it off to the Exchange staff. And actually, that's going to change. I think we're going to be handing it off directly to Division of Welfare now with our new decision. And they will take care then of scheduling the hearing and all of the notifications. So that swim lane down there, that's for Department of Administration, that is going to be changed when we update this to Division of Welfare. Any questions on the hearing process? Okay, so let's move on then to carrier-initiated appeals. As I said when we started, we really just kind of wanted to have a guided discussion. We haven't made any formal decisions about how exactly this is going to work. We know that there are eligibility concerns that you have that you may want to appeal. As we've said in a lot of these previous sessions, if you feel like you need to review the details of some of these financial payment history, or you have any other questions about the eligibility, the only way that you're going to get access to any of those records is through the appeal process. So I don't know if you guys want to sort of lead this discussion.
I think, so obviously we are doing the enrollment, eligibility, and billing functions. And so the questions that we have, kind of, what information do you think that you will need that's necessary for you to operate on the claims side from our side of the process? As we said before, we're willing to work with you and do what's right. We don't specifically see anything that you need from us, but we could be wrong. What is it that you think that you would need from us to do your functions as an insurer?
So this is Lisa from Math, and I just have a couple questions on, from a carrier appeals perspective. What types of things, for instance, what if we think we have somebody, let's just say, who's stolen someone's identity, and we've caught them before that they keep coming in and they're stealing someone's identity. So we think we've got fraud. Would that be something we would have to come in and appeal with you that, hey, we think we have evidence of fraud here and bring it in through you, or because it does say that we can terminate due to fraud?
Right, so we would look for the issuer to provide the evidence that you have. Maybe that's previous case histories, previous notes that you have in regards to that, and appeal that eligibility to the exchange. Keep in mind on the individual side, we're going through a deeper identity proofing process, and there's a higher burden on that consumer prior to enrollment through the exchange for QHPs. Again, obviously anyone's identity can be stolen, but it would be our hope that a lot of that's mitigated through that identity proofing process.
So I guess I was just, as the first thing that pops into my head was that, as an example, so you would expect the carrier to come in and submit their paperwork, before they would terminate for fraud. So, if we had someone that we felt was committing some sort of claims fraud.
Yeah, so I think fraud is one, where you've got a clear case of fraud. And those are going to be the ones that I think we need to take back and see how the exchange is specifically going to address cases of fraud. I think the more common ones are going to be you start getting a lot of out of area service claims, and you have reason to believe somebody's moved or whatever, but they're still on the policy through the Nevada Exchange. Something like that where it's a legitimate appeal of eligibility. For coverage.
And so before we would come in and say we think this person has moved out of state and is continuing to.
Right.
And should be, going to that state or whatever to get their coverage now. And so we would we wouldn't terminate or anything, we would bring that to the exchange.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
But we'll move pretty quick.
Yeah.
But this is not an appeals process of the nature of we don't agree with a policy you guys have instated. you know, like, oh, we don't like your fees or something. I mean, this is really about eligibility and, you know, what we, if we, like in that case, like you said, someone we think has moved out of state. This isn't a process on policy to appeal something, a decision made, right?
No, this is the operational eligibility appeals between the exchange and the carriers.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just had a couple questions that came up internally, and that I think it was taken as possibly just a way to appeal any policy decisions or whatever. This is operational. This is go live. This has nothing to do with, you know, we've made a decision to move this way or that way. This is an appeals process for operations and membership for us to work with the exchange.
And that actually goes back to our discussion earlier about a complaint versus an appeal. You certainly can file a complaint about a policy.
Well, hopefully, though, as part of this entire carrier onboarding process,
we'll avoid
that we're going to address as many of the potential complaints that you guys have. As John said,
right. I just wanted to make sure nobody was thinking that this was some process that was put into place like right now as we're vetting through.
No, please don't file appeals with the exchange because you don't like our per member per month fee or any of those.
This isn't the forum for that.
Correct.
So we get some elevator music. Just a reminder, if you have to jump off, don't put us on mute. Just,
or don't put us on hold.
Put us on mute.
Put us on mute.
Or hang up. And unfortunately, we can't do anything about this because we have no idea who actually put us on hold.
But if you find out who it is, we will put them on our wall of shame.
So, you know, really, as kind of part of this guided discussion.
Yeah.
Sorry, John.
So it appears that whoever had us on hold took us off hold. You don't have to identify yourselves. But if you do need to step off of the call, please simply hang up so we just get the beep and you can dial back in. Putting us on hold gives us that music, so please don't do that again. Thank you.
So part of the concept here with this guided discussion is, you know, a couple of great topics that you brought up, right? Fraud, how do we want to handle that, right? So we need to discuss how we're going to set some policies around, you know, a known case of fraud. Eligibility is going to be a big one. Are there other kind of big topics that the carriers see as areas that they might want to appeal to the exchange?
I don't know if there's anything with broker related. If you have brokers that are certified, I don't know because I haven't been up on Nevada and how you're working with certification and everything.
Well, to make a long story short, we are going to be certifying brokers to participate on the exchange. They will have to go through a very short, abbreviated course, so that way we can provide them exchange certification, and they still have to follow the same state rules through the Division of Insurance as they always have.
But it's not going to be a whole other licensing process. So they have their health license that they 20-hour course and the test and background check. They get the certification from DOI. They need to come to us to get their login into the computer so they can actually enroll people in the exchange. At that point, they'll have to sign an agreement, which we'll have to figure out what that agreement says. We'll work on that. And we anticipate a couple of hour course, not a huge long thing, but a few hours. Now they should be getting continuing education, and I imagine most of them are aware of the freight train that's coming on January 1st, but ours will be more of a general. This is the exchange. This is what's going on. Here's where you can get the information, but all of the information for the products will be available on the web portal. I don't know how in-depth you would prefer the training to be, but that's basically where we're at. Now, the other side of that is we are transmitting their national producer number to you. I imagine, though, if they don't have an appointment from you, they won't get paid. So my guess is you would still end up doing the typical training you have to do for your brokers for products that you offer. So they will be allowed to enroll anybody on the exchange. They'll get basically an appointment from us. Whether they get paid by you is up to you and the broker. And I would, I would guess that there has to be some kind of contract to make that happen. and some kind of process that you have in place to make that happen. So that's up to you guys and the brokers.
And as
Right.
similar
If they were a web broker or a certified broker with the exchange and an issuer felt there was some sort of misconduct going on from an appeals perspective, I don't know if that would come through this or not.
Yeah, so if you suspect broker misconduct, we would expect you to bring that to the exchange as an appeal of broker misconduct. However,
Okay.
if you get complaints, as we talked about, you have a consumer that contacts either the issuer and says, hey, I was working with John Smith and, he's a jerk. We would expect you to pass that like any complaint you receive about the exchange appropriately. Indicate, hey, you can contact the exchange and then we'll handle that internally.
And again, when he says pass that, doesn't mean that you pass us, you call us up and say, I got this
Right.
complaint, or it doesn't mean that you provide us a report. It just means that you give them our phone number to call us.
Right. So it's another category, though. I would think maybe possible appeals on broker, if we have a broker misconduct or something.
Okay.
And just,
and that would include misconduct by perhaps navigators and enrollment assisters as well.
Yeah. Now, realistically, so if something like that happens today, if there's broker misconduct, right? You deal with that through you maybe pull their appointment. If you go further than that, you go to the Division of Insurance, right? And that's probably still the best way to go about it. Is go through your current processes today. We still need to know about it at the exchange because we have an appointment and they can enroll people in any product. They simply won't get commissions. Well, they could be enrolling people in your product, even though they're not getting a commission. Because we don't want to, if a broker's enrolling somebody in a product, they will steer them however that is that they steer them or not steer them. But they are required to let the individual know that there's these other plans out there. And so an individual might choose another plan that they are not, that they're not appointed, that they have not signed an agreement with you on. And so there could be an issue such as that. And we wouldn't necessarily know about it if you guys had pulled their agreement or contract or whatever. We wouldn't necessarily know about that. It would probably be appropriate to tell us. But you should also tell the DOI as well, as their licensing entity. We definitely want to know about navigators and enrollment assisters. We are providing their funding, and we will cut them off if we need to.
One of the other things that we want to talk about as part of the guided discussion here was in regards to requests for documentation from the exchange. So there's going to be explicit times when you have reason to believe that you're appealing eligibility or other kinds of things. Wanted to understand what thoughts you might have around if if you suspected of something and needed documentation from the exchange to validate, or what those processes look like internally for you today as you interact.
I can speak to some of them. Like we require a social security card if we, so for instance, if we suspect someone is using someone else's social security because we already have them in our system and now they're using that same social security, we require them to provide us a valid social security card, and then we bump it up against the social security website to see if that's a valid social for them. Documentation that we require, marriage certificate, birth certificate, the standard ones we've talked about in the past meetings.
So the comment was that they require a social security number if something in their system shows that somebody else is using that number, or whatever the birth certificate, marriage certificate, stuff like that. So the question though is, going forward, if we are doing that entire process, do you still need that documentation? Social security number, right? We are bouncing that up against the federal data hub. We're matching it. We're doing some identity proofing. So theoretically, the information that you're getting is the appropriate person, unless they have matched all of the data to, say there's somebody else. Now, you might have somebody in your system that is using that Social Security number, and we need to know about that. We'll confirm that, and it could be the person that's already in your system is incorrect, so we'll have to talk about that. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, if we're collecting that to enroll somebody, do you need that still?
I think only if we did an appeal and we disagreed with.
So yeah, that's kind of what where I was getting was
that
if you're looking at the data and you're going, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. We have conflicting data. It's almost, we've got the mismatch. Everything matched on the federal hub. Everything came through, but we have this mismatch in our system. Hey, maybe you've had somebody in your system been committing fraud for 5 years and you never knew about it until now, right? So I think that's what we're saying is that's kind of the appeals opportunity where you come in and say, okay, let's look at your information. Let's look at what we have. I'm trying to determine if there's a reason that we need to pass that to you ahead of time.
Only if there was an appeal.
Okay. All right.
We have a few people in our system that are not in our system because every year they try to come on through their employer. They pass them to us every year, and we have validated that Social Security card is invalid. They're not a valid employee, and every year we deny them coverage, but they still try to send us that enrollment every year. So if we were to happen to get them on that group in the shop, we would know immediately that we already know their Social Security.
And we would expect an appeal, and then we would match up the two data sources.
But I think if you're bumping up against the federal hub, and if that has Social Security, valid Social Security,
the employer,
that shouldn't happen. It would stop.
Well, yeah, and so we do have to caveat that we are not allowed to bump them up against the hub on the shop side.
Right.
So there will be some of these issues that we will have to work through for sure.
Yeah, and shop is going to be where it is because the regs is written. The employer does the identity proofing. They're supposed to run E-Verify. They're supposed to, right? And that's where you're going to run into those issues.
Right.
So shop is probably where we're going to see more of this happen.
However, the plans are required to verify that for MSP.
MSP is?
So we're required to validate the Social Security number for Medicare secondary payer uploads for group health plans.
Can you send us that reg so we can work through that and talk to CSIO? Hey, you want the employer to validate it. This says you want the carrier to validate it. Who's supposed to validate it? We're supposed to validate it twice.
Federal government, actually, they say the employer, but then they make the RREs, which are the responsible related entities, which is the carriers, responsible for verifying that and uploading it.
Right, and so if you can get us a reg, because of all the changes that are occurring, we want to make sure that that's still the case, and not that so that we can be efficient in our processes, not just us, but collectively. Because to be quite honest, a lot of these things that are in place now, the feds haven't thought through yet.
Conveniently forgot.
Forgot. Didn't realize it was an issue. So,
particularly on the shop side. If you look at the preamble and the proposed regs on the shop appeals, I mean, for federal government, it's really, really short. I don't even know if it goes more than 2 pages. So,
that's going to be one of our questions if we're going to require that on the shop. If we're going to have to collect Social Security numbers and report that through our MSP GHP reporting, or if that was going to be excluded somehow by the federal government.
So the question that they're looking into is whether or not the validation of Social Security numbers for MSP requirements is still necessary, and so we'll look at the regs and ask CSIO and figure out what we need to do. But it sounds like at this point, it sounds like the employer is required to validate it, and then the carrier is supposed to validate it again. It's basically what it sounds like.
Because it's more around the COB issues, so we're trying to go back and forth on if they're in the shop, are they really an individual? Is it really a group? And is the group primary? Is Medicare secondary? So
and the fine's on the carrier, not the employer.
It's because you guys are always the bad guys. It's easy to find the bad guys.
Yeah.
$1,000 per day.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
We're not reporting.
Wow.
So I
had a question just in regards to the carrier process around fraud. I'm assuming that if you detect fraud, you retroactively terminate back to the date they were enrolled and then disallow any of those claims, correct? Okay. I just want to make sure that's...
Do you have your own internal investigation team that investigates fraud? I'm curious, or do you outsource that to a specific group? How do you guys handle how do you even find out that you believe someone is committing fraud?
I think it's a variety of ways. I mean, I have an eligibility department, so we verify eligibility. That's our job, is to verify they're actually eligible. Sometimes it comes through customer service or the call center. They say, hey, this person's covering their niece or nephew, because they admitted in the call center that this was their niece or nephew, and then we go back and investigate and see that they're not eligible.
That one's easy, because we have self-attested.
Yeah, sometimes it's through health services.
Yeah, and also we have an outside audit company that audits our claims.
Okay, so for like those that where you suspect the individual has moved out of state or moved out of the service area, you have an outside audit company that will come in and look at all the claims and say, it looks like we're getting a large influx of Oregon claims.
Exactly. They actually do it in context with checking the claims.
Yeah, there's a pretty...
They check for fraud at the same time. They check the eligibility requirements, so that's another way.
Yeah. There's some pretty complex algorithms that are out there to detect fraud.
They use software through their system, and it kind of picks up all that kind of stuff. Did you change address? Did you do this? You know.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
I think it might be appropriate to go ahead and put this piece on next week as well. Okay. Let's ask some of these questions. Put a one-page thing. What are carriers thinking about? Because they didn't get to see the questions that we had, unless there's one on the next page. No, there isn't. So let's go ahead and bring this back next week to discuss it more thoroughly, and see if the audience has more specific answers to the questions once they've had a chance to think about it some more.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. All right. So generally now is when we jump into our open questions, submitted questions, Q&A, general process. We did have some questions submitted. Eileen did a great job, I think, of hitting probably 95+% of those when we went through the various discussions. Are there any that you can see there, Eileen, that we missed?
I think there's only one. We were asked about the role of the Office of Consumer Help, whether they had any role or responsibility in the exchange. And basically, they have no responsibility within the exchange. If a consumer wants to seek their assistance outside, in dealing with things, they certainly can do that, but they have no role in any of our eligibility or enrollment decisions over here. And then the other question was whether there were any specific language requirements and outcome letters to exchange members. Just reiterating what we said earlier, if it's something that's an internal operational process to you that you do today, that you do off the exchange as well, just follow the state guidelines. We're not going to we have not determined any special requirements that we're going to have.
Okay.
And so I know we've had a pretty good discussion throughout this, but are there any other questions that ruminating in people's minds that they can't wait until next week to ask?
All right.
Along those same lines, just to see if we can kind of get a barometer, how does everyone feel that the carriers at exchange.amy.gov, is that working for a good entry and exit point for all the information that's coming in? Does that seem to be working a lot better? So we want to make sure that we take the time, but we are very expeditious in getting you the answers that you need outside of the ones that are going to be, of course, for the very next session where we're just going to answer them all at once.
Anybody on the phone have any concerns with how the process is working now?
I love it. Thank you. This is Adrienne from Anthem.
Apparently I was failing miserably before. So
you're doing great. It's just new and improved.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah. Backpedal now. So just so that you're aware, there is a third amended agenda or schedule, onboarding schedule on the carrier onboarding webpage. It adds 2 more dates, February 22nd and May 22nd and May 29th. May 22nd, May 29th. And the topics are TBD. It's just a follow-up to what we've got here. It may be that we cancel one or both of those if everybody feels like everything is going along just fine. The other thing is we are starting our one-on-one discussions with carriers. We have had initial discussions with 2 carriers and 1 more today. And they're basically, those initial discussions are simply these are the various tracks, and there's 3 tracks, Chad?
Yeah, so from a direct carrier engagement, we're using 3 tracks, one primarily being technical, one being more product, and the third kind of being operations. So we're setting up with each of the issuers specific points of contact and areas of responsibility within those tracks so that we can move forward as expeditiously as possible.
So please, if you are, hopefully you're still interested in participating in the exchange, please send that an email to carriers@exchange.nb.gov to let the group know that you would like to start that process. We are anxiously awaiting your involvement. Now, I know you're involved here, but I think both the exchange and the individual carriers will benefit from those one-on-one discussions.
I think I understand what the technical and operations track would be. What is the product track going to talk about?
So product is, there's a couple of decision points for carriers in terms of how their product is offered on the exchange, maybe such as plan packaging, partnership packages,
Okay.
collateral materials, logos, kind of those more product things that facilitate the sales process within the exchange.
And what about the templates? Is that technical or is that product?
So the rate plans and benefits templates, all the SURF filing, those are kind of part of the product track.
The information for the provider directory, the RX directory,
Right.
those
things.
Those templates.
Yep.
And then the technical side would be more of the enrollment eligibility,
What's on the
834 files.
It's EDI files, it's system endpoints, it's making sure that we've got secure communications established, we have those appropriate inboxes that we talked about established. It's really make sure we've got the plumbing hooked up between the exchanges and the issuers.
Any other questions on the phone?
God, we're done early.
Did Lisa from Anthem get off the phone? Because I could swear she'd have another question.
No, I'm still on, but no, I'm done for the day.
Well, that's amazing.
I
It's
have
a
another
record.
question, but it's a totally different subject.
All right.
We were actually thinking of putting it as an agenda item.
No, all kidding aside, we appreciate all the questions. It helps drives the discussion, provides a better product. So please continue to ask the questions. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it here, please ask it over email. Let us know. Call us up. Do what you need to do. Get your questions answered. Thank you very much to everybody for participating, and we hope to hear from you soon. See you next week.
I need to post those network adequacy standards. Do you want to just post them as is for next week?
Yes.
Or we need special on them? Just
We're meeting with you guys this afternoon.
Yep.
Okay.
Not you, but maybe not you specifically.
They're already posted.
Hometown Health.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
Yeah. But I think we need to add this stuff though.
Right. When I get theirs,
Yeah.
I'll make sure it gets posted
Yeah.
today by, 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
You did a great job this week on TV. I saw you.
Oh,
Four
thanks.
different times. But
You watch the news 4 times?
I do. I'm a news junkie. I can't help myself. If you watch at night, it's the same in the morning.
Yeah.
Morning, night, they're all the same. Yeah, I think that was really interesting, this scam. We've started to get some questions. We got some calls yesterday about free health insurance.
Yeah, the free health insurance. It's only going to cost you $3,000 a year if you're
Right.
$447,000 a year for a family of 4.
And oh, by the way, I quit my job and I have RA and I have
Let's say.
That's what I had been working on this morning too.
Marla said, yeah, no pre-existing conditions anymore right now.
I used to get it from Eileen. Be the workforce doing it. But that one
So we're having
challenge.
Did you get my response? Tammy actually helped me load an example of that letter. So your second scenario. On
So I'm going to post in that with
time
the
frame.
stuff we got
Yeah,
from the
so
board.
she would send,
Easy
if
way
they-
that
if their
what
premiums
John
were
was
due
just
on March
talking about,
1st,
that one
in your
page
example,
of follow-up for
and we didn't
questions
receive payment
for
by
the
the
appeals
20th,
process.
she would send out a
Questions
letter
we've asked
10
the
days prior
carriers
to
for them
the
to come
end of
back
that
and
month. And so then on
That's
March,
at the end of this, you want to go
on
there,
March,
so
so March 20th, they would get a letter
those
saying,
today.
hey, you're late.
So
Okay.
March 30th,
We'll also
you
get
would
the
terminate them.
Q&A.
Consolidated
effective
Q&A
March
needs to be
Right. So what I meant by effectuated was
bullets.
when
Yeah.
did you actually?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not talking about
yeah,
big
which
30 pages.
Exactly.
So-
5-6 bullets. I think that's all the questions we
On a
asked.
single slide.
On a
Yeah, single slide. It's
They
going to
have
be,
a 30-day,
what are the
grace
types
period
of
to March
exchange
30th.
decisions
You
you
send that letter
anticipate
March
appealing?
20th, so you got the 10-day requirement. On March 30th, you effectuate
Right, we
termination
talked about,
retroactive to
broker
February
misconduct,
20th.
we talked about individual
Or
and
do
shop
non-equal
eligibility,
fraud.
we talked about fraud. Are there
They
other?
would wait.
That fraud bullet is going to be what we come back with our own policy. next
Correct,
week.
yes,
So,
yes, uh-huh.
so that needs to be there. And then
I think it has to be case by case. I think that's something we can.
my question, that's why I asked.
So it's basically
do
what I
you
said.
guys want to
It's
get
second
into
round.
the
I
investigation
apologize.
policy?
Yeah, no, I think
The
that's
first one was really,
So
Yeah,
the
I'm
first
very
round was all,
cautious about what
Yeah.
I
I was
like, wow,
say
I
we're going to be able to do for
Yeah, no, that's all right. That makes
because
sense.
if
So
we
that,
have
that
to
will
do it,
help
Yeah.
us.
And then we do the same thing
I
with
don't know if we want to look at
individuals, so
outsourcing it.
outside
I
of
don't know
APTC,
And I've got your.
Here's the way I see it. I see.
have
So,
the same.
and this is what.
So that would cover that
Same
first
notification.
paragraph.
Some,
it's we can
Okay,
stop.
so